Yes, if I'm ready to go, I'll get it up and running.
Yeah, we're only missing one department.
All right, it is 7
Missing
o'clock,
three.
and I should turn on my microphone. We're gonna go ahead and call our Tuesday, November 2nd, city council meeting to order. We'll start with the roll call.
Councilman Becker,
Here.
Councilman Hartwick. Here. Councilman Housley.
Here.
Councilman Johnson,
Here.
President Scheer.
Here. Agenda item 3, public hearing, 3A. The public hearing relating to the City of Fort Atkinson 2022 operating budget and 2022 through 2027 capital improvements plan.
Okay, so tonight is the public hearing for our proposed 2022 operating budget, the 2022 capital improvements project budget, and the 2023 through 2027 capital improvements project plan. This document was posted on the city's website. It was distributed to the city council on the 27th of October. We did have a draft budget workshop on October 12th. And a summary was published in the Jefferson County Daily Union. No action is required by the city council tonight. Okay. So I'll go over some significant changes from the 2021 budget process. First and foremost, this document and the process itself have been changed. We started from scratch this year, reviewed all the processes and procedures, and I wanted to understand all of the numbers in the document, as it's my first year presenting a budget to this council. We combined the operating budget with the capital improvements projects into one document. And department heads were asked to produce a document that identified the services their department provides, their 2021 accomplishments, their goals for the 2022 budget, and how those are in line with the comprehensive plan. There were several new funds separated from the general fund, most notably the library fund. We'll talk about that more in depth a little bit later. Other funds separated include the taxi, airport, CDBG closed Loeb Lorman project, the CDBG closed water main project, the American Recovery Plan, American Rescue Plan Act fund, as well as the Capital Catalyst Fund. These are some of our accomplishments in 2021, including coordinating the milling and overlaying, repaving and or seal coating of 4.7 miles of roads, which is 7% of the city's 65 miles of roads. We were awarded 2 CDBG closed grants for a total of $1.8 million. We made significant progress on the Banker Road parcels, saved almost $50,000 in premiums by changing municipal insurance carriers, procured technology upgrades to this room to support hybrid meetings, and hired 11 new full-time staff members to existing positions. We also received a $300,000 grant from WEDC for the Capital Catalyst revolving loan program, applied for and received a conventional rate case from the PSC for water main replacement, applied for and was awarded a $273,000 grant from the Fort Atkinson Community Foundation to support a possible 2022 public safety referendum and startup costs associated with bringing 911 EMS service under the city's fire department. That is pending several additional approvals. And pending council approval tonight, we will apply for a neighborhood investment grant from the Department of Administration for $4.9 million to support the base project, including significant public infrastructure improvements. Some of the goals for the 2022 budget include to qualify for the 2023 expenditure restraint payment, work with the Department of Transportation and community stakeholders on the Robert Street Bridge Deck replacement with safety and aesthetic improvements, prepare for that possible 2022 public safety referendum and possible 2023 implementation. Complete work on a boundary agreement with the town of Koshkonong, provide a 2% wage increase for full-time staff and a 1% wage increase for part-time staff. Administer 4 elections, complete final Riverwalk and streetscape improvements in TID 7, hire a consultant to assist with downtown and Janesville Avenue corridor plans, prepare and implement a new city council orientation process, complete those CDBG closed projects, as well as a major road construction project in conjunction with that water main replacement project. We're going to be doing some succession planning in the police department. Several long-term dedicated staff members may be retiring in 2022. We'll continue to analyze the current equipment needs and realistically plan for their replacement. And another goal would be to maintain existing staffing and service levels. The 2022 proposed operating budget includes a total tax levy of $8,098,750, which is a 0.67% increase over the levy for the 2021 budget. Without our tax increment districts, it is only a 0.24% increase over 2021. This budget does qualify for the expenditure restraint program, and it is within the levy limits imposed by the state. Our estimated city portion of the mill rate is $8.69 per thousand of assessed value. This is a little bit less than what was presented at the workshop on the 12th of October due to the slight increase in assessed value at $931 million. The overall mill rate is not yet known. We're waiting for the county to certify their results or their levy. This is the budget summary document. It's a lot of numbers. Nobody can probably see them from where they are, so I'll just hit the highlights here. Notable changes include a 10.15% increase to the regulation and compliance revenues due to increases in building permit fees and municipal court penalties based on past actual data. We have a 26% decrease in the culture and recreation general fund expenditure category, but that is due to the segregation of the library expenditures into a separate fund. It's a 27.66% increase to the public service enterprises fund. That looks large, but the amount is only $11,000, almost $12,000. So, and that is the contingency fund for any unplanned expenditures that may come up in 22. The allowable levy increase, estimated allowable levy increase by the state for 2022 is $18,266. I just want to note that most of our contracted services increase between 3 and 5% in 2022. And the expected increase to our garbage and recycling contract alone is over $21,000. So it was a difficult budget to balance. This next slide shows the impact on the city's portion of property taxes. You can see that it is minimal. At a property assessed at $150,000, the city's portion, the difference between the 2021 and 2020 tax bills will be $8.79, or about 73 cents per month. So again, that is the city's portion only. The Tech College and the school district have certified their levies, but the county has not. They intend to meet on the 4th of November. The next slide categorizes our general fund revenues. As you can see, general property taxes make up 64%, the vast majority of the revenues, and that is the section that is limited by the levy limits imposed by the state. The other major source of revenue for our budget is intergovernmental revenues at 22%. The next table breaks down those intergovernmental revenues further. You can see that the state shared revenue is 48%. General transportation aids makes up 29% of that, and expenditure restraint makes up 9%. And this is the portion, this is about 22% of our overall general revenues there. This is a table that reviews the intergovernmental revenues from the state from 2018 to 2022. You can see on the bottom row, if you can see that, shows the 0.18% increase in 2022. So that is in line with the lean rest of the budget here. The next slide shows a breakdown of our general fund expenditures. You can see that 43% of our general fund expenditures are spent on our public safety departments, 27% on public works, 17% on culture and recreation. General government makes up 9%. The next slide shows a summary of the total tax levy, the city's tax levy of just over $8 million. 65% is general fund allocations less any revenue outside property tax. So that makes up 65%. Our debt service is 13% of this. Transportation fund is 6%. The library makes up 7%. Our capital improvement budget is 3%, and our portion of the TID increment is 6%. The next slide reviews our assessment ratio. The state statutes require that the city's values are assessed between 90 and 110% of fair market value. In 2021, we are at 84.2%. So we are out of compliance with that. This marks the second year of non-compliance. At the fourth year, the Department of Revenue issues us a letter. At the fifth year, we get a second letter. And at the sixth year, we would get a supervised reassessment, which we would not allow that to happen. And that would be very expensive and time consuming. And we will certainly continue to monitor this in the coming year or so. Our last revaluation was in 2017, and we currently do have a 5-year maintenance contract with our assessor. So the 2021 assessed value is just over $931 million. The 2021 equalized value looks very strange on that slide. It is actually $1,105,765,400. So there's an extra digit in there. I apologize for that. The next slide is a table of the city's full-time staff. This used to be in the budget document. It is not, so I figured I would throw it in this presentation because the council or the public may be used to seeing it. So in 2022, we are proposing 86 full-time staff, which is just over what we had in 2015 and still under what we had in 2005. The next thing I want to cover quickly is the 2022 road construction project. We talked about this in the budget workshop, and there was a little confusion over the project and the funding. So I included a map just for some reference points. The Rockwell Avenue is along the north side of the map, highlighted in yellow. South Main is on the east side in yellow. Janesville is on the west side, and then Hilltop Trail is along the south side. So it's total about 1.13 miles of right of way, including roadway, sidewalks, water main replacement, hydrants and services, stormwater improvements, and sanitary sewer improvements. This table outlines the funding for this project. The bottom portion of the table, which I'm not sure if you can see well, but I can describe it a little bit here. Funding sources include our CDBG closed water main grant. That's $362,000. We have our water main replacement from Fund 3, which is our water utility fund, at about $940,000. Our transportation fund financing, that's funds from Fund 5 at $710,000. And that's made up of levied funds, the $500,000 that was in the levy, as well as our registration DMV registration fees that we collect. The wastewater fund, Fund 2 will cover $30,000 and the stormwater fund, Fund 10 will cover about $50,000. The gap funding we are proposing to borrow at about $670,000. Okay. Just a couple items regarding our debt payments and projected borrowing. This is the 2022 debt payment summary. There's a couple of things to point out here. The total debt payments due in 2022 will be $2.4 million across all funds. 1.097 million is general fund or levy supported. The state limits our general obligation debt to 5% of equalized value. So the city's borrowing capacity is just over $55 million. As of 1/1/22, the city will have about $10 million in general obligation debt, which is 18% of our borrowing capacity. Low debt is a sign of financial health and improves our bond ratings. However, it also debt can also be a useful tool when operating funds are capped due to the levy limits that we're experiencing at the state level. In 2022, these are the projects that we are proposing to borrow for. That includes 1 police squad car, 2 dump plow trucks, a skid loader, and a transit van with a water tank. And our annual street reconstruction program in conjunction with that CDBG water main project, and then Robert Street Bridge improvements for an estimated total of 1.5 million. We could increase this when we actually size the borrowing to include another street reconstruction project if the council so desires, to take advantage of our low interest rates for municipal borrowing, as well as some fixed borrowing costs. Okay. Moving on to just a little bit of information about our tax increment financing districts. So these terms TID and TIF are sometimes used interchangeably, but they actually do have different meanings. The TID is the actual district and the TIF is the financing mechanism. The base value is the total value of real and personal property established when the TID is created. The increment is the increased value in the TID above the base. And then the tax increment is that tax revenue from the increased value increment. We do have a joint review board, which governs these tax increment districts, and that is a body representing the taxing jurisdictions, reviews and approves new TIDs, as well as annually reviews our active TIDs and the reports we create for those. TIF is a financing mechanism to spur development in an area that would not otherwise see that development. It is a very powerful economic development tool and has long-term benefits for all of the taxing jurisdictions. This is a chart that kind of shows how these work. You see the base value that the city, county, technical college, district, and municipality that is locked in when the TID is created, that green line. And then the taxing jurisdictions continue to receive taxes based on that base value. But any taxes based on the increment value are put into the TID funds to pay for debt, expenditures, projects, et cetera. When the TID is terminated, those taxing jurisdictions receive the taxes based on the base value plus the increment, which is good for everybody. If funds do remain in the account at closure, those are distributed amongst the 4 taxing jurisdictions. Bringing it to our tax increment districts. This is the table I use in the formula. So I have a placeholder in there right now for Jefferson County. So all of those highlighted numbers will likely change before the budget process is complete. But I just wanted to demonstrate how this is applicable locally. So the first column there, A, is the apportioned levy. That's the amount requested by each taxing jurisdiction. And then that is multiplied times the equalized value with the TID out to come up with the interim rate. That is multiplied by the equalized value with the TID in to come out with the amount to be levied. That's in column E. Then we subtract A from E to come up with the increment. and that's in the last column. So that's the total increment that goes to the city's 3 tax increment districts. And then this next series of tables shows how the increment is distributed into those 3 TID funds, TID 6, 7, and 8. So the increment value is multiplied times the interim rate to come up with the increment for that TID. And then the portion of increment is then applied to each total TID to determine the tax, to determine each taxing jurisdiction's total for each TID. Okay, so again, those highlighted fields will change when after the county certifies the levy. No, that was a super quick way to explain it, but it was, I noticed there was an article in the Fort Atkinson Online about TIDs, so I figured I would bring some of the applicability to our local TIDs through this presentation. This last slide is our projected 2022 end of year balances for all of our funds. So you saw in the budget document, if you had a chance to review it, there are probably about 22 funds, different funds that we have. So this was published as part of the budget summary document and projects the ending balances for each of these funds as of 12/31/21. So we do the year-end projections for this year. Then we add the projected net for 22 to come up with that estimated fund balance of December 31st, 2022. The last column on the right-hand side there is the property tax contribution, if there is any. So you can see most of these funds do not have a property tax contribution. If you took those 8 numbers along the right-hand side there and they total $8 million, and we brought that back to one of the charts at the beginning of the slide presentation, you'd see that this is how all of those, the summary of the tax levy, this is where all those are going. Okay. So that is my budget presentation for today. Any questions, comments, requests for additional information can come to me. I believe this document will come back to the council on the 16th of November for actual action. No action is required tonight, but there is a public hearing.
Thank you. It's always amazing how much we can get accomplished within that budget. And then also with the year that 2020 and 2021 turned out to be, how much we were able to get accomplished in the midst of a pandemic. So appreciate all of the hard work and effort that has gone into making this document more user-friendly. So thank you. That will take us on to agenda item number 4, which is public comment. Anybody who is here for an item within our consent agenda, we'll have you hold until the end of public comment. A reminder, the city council will receive comments from city residents. Comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per individual. Anyone wishing to speak is required to sign up in advance or state the following items for the record when called upon. That would be name, address, subject matter, and contact information. No action will be taken on any public comments unless the item is also elsewhere on the agenda. We have nobody signed up in person, correct? All right, so this will be a first call for public comment for anybody either in the crowd this evening or on Zoom. This will be a second call for public comment. And this will be a third and final call for public comment. At this time, I would ask that if anybody is here to speak about an item within our consent agenda, that they approach the podium at this time.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mariah Hadler. I'm a representative of Jones Dairy Farm and work for the Jones Market here in Fort Atkinson. We're excited to potentially light up Fort Atkinson again this year and provide some joy to the community. And we have another business partner that would like to join us, and that's Global BKS Dental, Bender, Kind, and Stafford. So the plan is to have the same portion of the bike path plus extend it. It was requested that I provide a map of our plans. So I have that, a few copies if you guys want to pass those. This is Michelle. This is the COI. So my only other thought or discussion that I'd like to mention is that the city would love to expand this platform, and potentially the chamber would like to jump on board and use it as a tourism opportunity for the city of Fort Atkinson. And so I'm curious, once BKS Dental kind of joins the display, I have a feeling that we might get some requests from other businesses to participate. And if that's the case, the chamber and I and Lisa would like to be prepared with some response as to what the potential could be or should be. And so I'll leave the floor open. It's an inquiry, I guess.
To address that. Can't address that within public comment.
Sounds good.
But I'm
Sounds
sure it's a
good.
conversation that will occur.
Sounds good. Is there anything else you need from me?
Looking forward to it. You
Awesome.
want to hold off on the snow part though? That's
Yes, yes,
fine for a while,
exactly. Well, and if
so.
anybody wants to come string lights, look us up this weekend and next weekend. Thank you, guys.
Thank
It's
you.
coming back. Thanks, Maria.
Is there anybody else commenting on consent agenda items? Seeing none, that will end our public comment and we will move along to agenda item 5, which is our consent agenda. As a reminder, the consent agenda that is outlined is presented for action. Items may be removed from the consent agenda on the request of any one council member. Items not removed may be adopted by one action without debate. Any removed items may be taken up either immediately after the consent agenda or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the council president.
I move to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions, discussion? All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Takes us to agenda item 6, petitions, requests, and communications. 6A, the presentation of the water system master plan.
Evening. The 2021 master plan's purpose is to aid the utility in its long-term planning and to provide an analysis of the infrastructure's ability to provide a reliable supply of water to service residents and businesses. It also analyzes the utility's ability to maintain adequate pressures and fire flows throughout the existing city and future developing areas. It's recommended that the master plan's updated every 10 years. Fort Atkinson first completed a master plan in 1998 and then again in 2007. Pat Planton from Baxter Woodman was the project manager for both of those plans, and his knowledge of the Fort Atkinson water system has proven to be invaluable. And it's really been a pleasure working with him, and I've learned a lot about our water system working through this plan. Pat's here tonight to provide the council with a brief overview of the plan and to answer any questions that you may have. So I'll turn it over to Pat.
All right, can everybody hear me through the mask? Yeah. Very good. As Tim mentioned, my name is Pat Planton. I'm a senior project manager with the consulting engineering company of Baxter Woodman. I'm based out of Milwaukee. And with me, I've got Scott Harte. He was a project engineer for this project. And as Tim also mentioned, is that I do have some history here. Most of you might be aware of master planning for large utility projects, for large utilities. Since the value of infrastructure is so expensive, and some of these projects, the major infrastructure projects might take a year or two to design, get permitted, get constructed. So utilities have to take the long-term approach and look down the road using a master plan as a roadmap of how to get there, how to most efficiently use the ratepayers' money. So you've got to borrow a lot of money and try to systematically grow the system to meet your customers' demands as Fort Atkinson grows and has grown over the last 100 years or more. So Tim did mention I did the 2007 master plan. And that's the cover that's on the screen right there. And then when I was a much younger man, I also did the one in 1998, and I have those files on board somewhere. So I was able to get copies of those. And some of that information from 98 is a little fuzzy, but 2007 is pretty clear. And of course, we just finished the master plan earlier this year. And those are some of the things that I will go through in the next few minutes. First thing when you do a utility master plan is you need to know what your planning boundary is, and especially your planning horizon. And usually for large utility projects, it's 20 years. This boundary came from the city's comprehensive plan. So we didn't create that boundary. We got that from the city, what their long-term look was for what areas surrounding the city, which would require city water and city sewer. So our plan matches that boundary and also matches the boundary that was used for any facility planning that was done for the wastewater utility as well. Per the plan that you're probably all very familiar with, the growth that is going to occur over the next 5, 10, 20 years is going to be to the north and to the northwest in that area over the freeway and by the high school, to the southwest, east of Highway 12, and also to the southwest. And that area had been looked at as far as developing over the last 25 years since I've been doing master planning for the city of Fort Atkinson Water Utility. So that really hasn't changed much, but the development to the north definitely is going to provide some challenges for the water utility that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Probably all familiar with population growth in the city. This chart goes back 100 years. And as you can tell, there's been a steady growth in population. Not surprising that during World War II and during the early 80s, when I graduated from college with a big recession, that there wasn't a lot of growth, there wasn't a lot of population increase. And then the recessions in the early 2000s and 2009 and 10, that put a bump, kind of a crimp on development and growth of population. And that's seen all throughout the state, all throughout the country, that recessions just put a damper on growth, development, and population increases. So that was taken into account. We're projecting the city population. Actually, we're not projecting the comp plan and the State Department of Administration. We got those longer term 2040 population projections. We're using 15,300 as a 20-year population for the city. And population has a big impact on water needs, obviously. We'll talk a little bit about that. Since the last master plan, there's been a pretty significant drop in water sales for a variety of reasons. Most assuredly is that people are using less water every year. The price of water is getting more expensive. So there's a sales signal or a cost signal to the customers as you're replacing your appliances every 10, 15, 20 years. The new washers and dishwashers use less water, and that's just going to keep happening further into the future. So there'll be less and less water sales for the water utility, causes some financial pressures because a large percentage of your costs are fixed. In fact, on the order of probably 80%. The upside is though that there's been increase in industrial sales. Not that will completely offset the declines in commercial and residential sales, but there has been a nice uptick in some of the industrial sales. Some of the key numbers to keep in the back of your mind is the average daily pumpage that Tim's water utility does on an average basis per day, 1.7 million gallons. That's how much the water is pumped, but you don't sell as much water as you pump because there's some losses in the system, there's leakage, other things that can't be accounted for, maybe some metering inconsistencies. So 1.7 million gallons per day is pumped, about an average 1.6 million gallons per day is sold. That difference is water losses that the Public Service Commission is trying to put lots of pressure on us to make sure that utilities minimize that water loss because it's precious and it's helps you save on operating costs. So average system losses in Fort Atkinson over the last 5 or 6 years has been around that 11, 12%. A goal would be 10%. Public Service Commission will start raising red flags if it hits 15% or more. If you go in for a rate increase and they look at your annual report and you say our water losses are 17%, they're going to come back to you and say, tighten up your system before we'll let you increase your rates. So we use 10% as our projected water losses going forward, and that's a fact of life with the water system. You're just going to have some losses that you have to live with. On the industrial side, 45% of average sales is to the industrial customers. There are probably hundreds of water utilities in the state of Wisconsin that would love to have a large percentage of their sales to big, consistently water using industries like you've got in Fort Atkinson. They don't put a lot of pressure on your systems where you need a lot more supply sources in summer, like your residential customers do. They're watering all their water, they're watering their lawns in summer, requires you to have much more supply capacity. If you were just serving these 4 large industries, you might need half the supply and you wouldn't have to worry about those peaks in the summertime. So very, very good news for the system for that. We projected 47 gallons per person per day for residential customers. That's down from about 60 almost gallons per person per day from 2007. So again, that just goes to show that people are using less water, especially for the residential customers. And we anticipate that trend is going to continue into the future. We may be a little bit conservative by saying we think it might stay at 47 over the next 20 years. I'm not too concerned about that because we'll talk about how much supply is available. So even if we have somewhat of a conservative assumption at 47 gallons per person per day, it's not going to force the utility to need additional water supply facilities or new wells. The numbers that are most important here are the maximum daily pumpage. That's the supply that the utility needs to meet, that largest usage in one day in the summertime. The design max day for now is 3.4 million gallons per day and projected to go up to 3.9, 20 years out. So those are kind of key numbers. A quick overview of the system. I'm not sure how many people know a lot about the water system, but it's a relatively old system, just like the city is a relatively old community. 5 wells. First well number 3 was constructed over here near the river, 1931. The most recent, the youngest well that you've got, well number 7, that was constructed 54 years ago. So relatively old facilities to supply water for Fort Atkinson. 3 booster stations. There's 2 ground reservoirs, 2 elevated tanks, one on the far south side, one up on Hilltop by the park. And there was only 1 pressure zone for decades for the origination of the water system. And one of the major recommendations of the 2007 master plan was to create the south pressure zone, because as the utility needed to serve properties further south, the utility could maintain at least a 35 pound per square inch pressure that's required by DNR. So a new pressure zone was developed with a booster station, so that pressure got jacked up and you could begin serving those homes and subdivisions further to the south. Kind of the same situation that we'll talk about on the north side of the city in the future as that area develops outside the city limit. Well 5 produces actually about almost a quarter to a third of the water in the system, even though you've got 5 wells. Well 5 over in Jones Park is a big producer and a very consistent producing water supply well. Overall, these older facilities are doing well. They've been maintained on a regular basis, and there's no reason why the 5 wells cannot supply water, good quality water to the customers of the utility for years to come. So I'm not too concerned about needing new wells or replacement wells for what you've got. And that's good news because new wells are hard to get permitted through the Public Service Commission and through the DNR. They're expensive, probably on the order of $1 million or $2 million per project. And I don't think you're going to be in that situation, at least over the next 20 years. So that's real positive news for the utility. One of the things we didn't do in 98, or I didn't do in 2007, is we looked at pumping efficiency, electrical efficiency. You know, it's kind of a big deal now with renewable energy and trying to make maximum use of your facilities and be very efficient. So we did some wire to water pump efficiency tests, looking at how much electrical energy is going into the motors and how much mechanical energy is being produced by the pumps. Good news is the well pumps are either good to excellent on a performance efficiency basis. Booster pumps, a little bit of a mixed bag. The station right across the street, the main station, that's 50 years old. Those pumps really haven't had much work done to them. So it's basically original equipment, both electrical and mechanical pumps and valves. And we kind of anticipated the efficiencies may not be as good, and they were actually a bit lower than I thought they might be. So booster pump efficiency, fair. There's a pump over there that's used quite a bit. Number two, that's really on the poor side. So that leads us to one of our next recommendations. It's going to be looking at replacing the equipment over there at the main station. I mentioned it was put in 1971. The electrical equipment is old. If there's failures, you're not going to find spare parts to replace that equipment just because it's so old. The smaller pumps, 1 and 2, virtually run all the time. The larger pumps, 3 and 4, really don't run much at all because they're much higher capacity. Tim's got a concern that those larger pumps, because of the way they were designed 50 years ago, larger capacity pumps, there's some surging in the system, potential discolored water in the system because of the higher capacity. And the potential always is there for larger pumps being operated of main breaks. So consequently, they don't get used much unless there's flushing going on in the system. So that's the existing system, kind of a brief overview. We looked at the system itself, kind of built on what I looked at in 98 and 2007, looked at pressures, looked at fire flows, flow capacity within the system, the reliability of the system to meet their customer needs when there's a power outage. Also looked at how much supply you may need in the future. We talked about that just briefly before, and how much storage you might need. One of the things we actually did 20 plus years ago was create a hydraulic computer model of the system. And it's been updated twice now over the last 20 years, that we can model flows and pressures, things on the computer, and gives us a real good handle on what actually happens in a complex system. So we looked at pressures, and this is a GIS map, overlaying your GIS mapping for the city. There's a very small area. Everyone's probably familiar with the Hilltop Reservoir is. This area right up here. And it's not probably surprising to anybody that high elevation area, pressures are on the lower side, maybe 35 pounds. 35 pounds of pressure is the minimum code requirement by DNR. The maximum is 100. So the only place there's really an area that rubs up against that DNR standard is that area around the Hilltop Reservoir. But that's the same thing we came up with 24 years ago in the first master plan that we did in 98. Pressures in the blue area, that's between 50 and 65. Pressures really aren't a concern in your system. The development to the north, as you can see, this green area, that's pressures between 35 and 50, and the elevation just gets higher as you go north and you go northwest. So the existing system is not going to be able to serve those properties. I think everybody pretty much, especially on the utility side, knows that. And as you start to develop anything beyond your corporate boundary to the north, you're going to have to do the same thing you did in the south with the south pressure zone and a booster station. So that's, as soon as that development dictates that, the utility's gonna have to respond accordingly, be prepared to do that, because it could be a 1 to 2 year project potentially if that has to happen. We also looked at flow capacity within the system, and we look at that using fire flows. How much water can come out of the system at a fire hydrant? At a minimum DNR requirements, so you have to have at least 500 gallons per minute available at a hydrant, at minimum of 500. This map, this color-coded map, this heat map shows that the red areas are less than 1,000 gallons a minute. We recommend 1,000 gallons per minute in residential areas, more than 3,000 gallons per minute in high-value industrial or commercial areas, high-value commercial areas. Purple areas are more than 3,000 gallons a minute. Like I'd mentioned before, the red area is less than 1,000. That's not to say it's substandard, but we'd like to see at least 1,000 gallons per minute. I'm sure if the fire chief was here, he'd say more is always better from the fire side. But in general, the city is very well protected for fire protection for the water system. There's 3 small areas, 3 actually intersections where getting 500 gallons per minute probably is going to be a challenge. And that's really this area over here to the east. There are dead ends over there. There's very old water mains over there, old cast iron mains. You've got areas in the system that are less than 6 inches in diameter for water mains. That's substandard nowadays. And that just limits how much fire you can get, how much water you can get out of the hydrants for fire protection. But in general, the point to take home is that the city's fairly well protected. One of the things that the city did, some major improvements to the fire department and some water system improvements as well. Your ISO classification went from a 4 to a 3 in 2019, which was a great benefit to the city, and any industrial and commercial fire insurance premiums should have gone down and reflect that better protection for those customers. So that's a a real good thing for the city overall for fire protection. Now, this previous map showed that where the water is available, but it doesn't really tell us where the water is necessarily needed for fire protection. So we took that map, overlaid it on a land use map. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but there's cross-section shaded areas here in this residential area, over here by the park, over here that we were just talking about. Those are areas where fire protection is between 500, 800 gallons per minute, a little bit on the low side, but there's reasons for that. This whole area down along Highway 26, this industrial area, that's something we noticed 25 years ago. There's a small 8-inch water main on Janesville Road. There's only so much water you can get out of an 8-inch water main, especially in an industrial area where you might need 3,000 gallons a minute. So that's always going to be a challenge, but it's not as if there's no fire flows available there. They might be 2,000 gallons a minute. It's just not the 3,000 that ISO would recommend. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. Looking on the supply side, not only do you have to have your system be reliable in case there's a power outage, that you also have to have enough supply to meet your maximum daily demand with your largest unit out of service, which is well number 7. For the reliability, the average day demand in 2020 or 2040, I'm sorry, is 2.2 million gallons per day. Wells 6 and 7 by themselves that have standby power can do 3 million gallons. So that isn't an issue for your water system. You've got more than enough standby power in case there was a catastrophic failure of the electric system. Looking at the supply needs, again, with your largest unit out of service. So with well 7 out of service for whatever reason, you can still pump in 4.4 million gallons per day into your system. Your design max day currently is 3.4 million gallons a day. In 2040, we're looking at about 3.9. So there's plenty of supply right now with your facilities that you've got, even with well 7 out of service. The point there is that it's incumbent upon the utility in the city to make sure that those wells stay maintained and rehabilitated on a fairly regular basis every 10 years to keep that supply capacity intact. This graph that I show here comes right out of the master plan. And you can see on a month-by-month basis, the water supply available goes down a little bit. There's a well rehab here. It goes down a little bit. There's a well rehab here. This is the supply capacity with all your wells, about 8 million gallons a day, more than enough that you'd ever need. But this difference here between the total and the reliable, that's well number 7 right here. So even going out 20 years, you still have enough. The green line is your projected maximum daily demand going out 20 years. So that isn't an issue. So you don't have to spend $1.5 million, $2 million looking for a new water supply well. The last thing from the evaluation is looking at storage needs. Water systems have storage for a variety of reasons. Pressure equalization helps control pumps, starts and stops with that water level in those tanks. Fire flow, obviously, emergency water is available at a moment's notice when it's sitting up in the air. It doesn't have to be pumped into the system. Currently, you've got storage needs of 1.2 million gallons. Projected in 2040 is 1.3 million gallons. You've got that 1.3 million gallons right now between your 2 ground reservoirs and your 2 elevated tanks. So you won't be needing any elevated water tanks for pure storage in the whole system. But if you look at the south pressure zone and potentially in the north pressure zone in the future, as those get built out, a booster station may not be enough. You may have to put in a 250,000 gallon elevated tank. And we've got in our recommendations for longer term improvements. So getting to the tail end of the report, the main recommendations, we talked about the main station. We'd recommend that the existing 50-year-old equipment, both mechanical and electrical, be replaced, including new valves, and put in variable frequency drives for those pumps to eliminate the surge suppression. It'll be much more efficient. And it's time they've really used it over their useful life. That budget estimate's about $400,000 to do that. Not just inside, nothing with the building, nothing with the structure, just the electrical and mechanical equipment. Talked about the north high level pressure zone. That's really going to be when that develop dictates. And I guess it's important for everyone to realize what could happen in the future out there so the utility can respond accordingly. And if there has to be borrowing, which I'm sure there'll have to be for a $1 to $2 to $3 million project, that you have to make sure that that is ready to go. I think the north zone can just be handled with the booster station initially, just like the south pressure zone. When that area gets fully built out over the freeway, you might be looking at a water tower because there'll be some higher fire flow demands that are required, and a tower would help you achieve that. But that's long term down the road. Let's see, we talked about the salt zone also needing some elevated storage or maybe more supply, but that's again at full build out or approaching full build out. We talked about the well rehabilitation, try and do that every 10 years on a regular basis to keep that supply capacity up. Distribution system, we had some recommended improvements to replace some old mains, some problem mains that been on the plan for a while, and so replacing some smaller 4-inch mains that you've got in your system. Andy's going to put together a plan to look at long-term over 20 years. What's the best way to look at replacing infrastructure, not only street, water, sewer, storm. And that's part of what this plan has helped to support for that. So wrapping things up, short-term improvements, talked about the main station, north pressure zone, distribution system improvements. For the next 5 years, our recommendations is almost $9 million, but before you fall off your chairs, this infrastructure replacement program is, 3/4 of that. And that's somewhat, I know that I think I saw on your slide up, you're spending or funds that you've got available about $900,000 per year. So that's not outlandish on a yearly basis to do that, to replace 1% of your distribution system for that. So that's the lion's share is going to be existing infrastructure in the ground that needs to be replaced. And then by the same token, longer term improvements. Talked about the 2 towers, north and south, long term. You have a lot of development on the north side and a lot of development on the south side before those 2 major projects would have to be done. And then again, this $35 million price tag probably, again, looks outlandishly high, but $10 million of that would be just to support transmission mains to serve those outlying areas inside the boundary. And some of that cost could be recovered through assessments, some of that. And then the infrastructure replacement program, again, a little more than $1 million a year. And again, that's discretionary. It has to work in with the plan that Andy and Tim are going to work on for that. So I talked about the master plan being a systematic approach to look at long-term improvements to a major utility system like Fort Atkinson operates. And Tim had mentioned, try to revisit this plan every 10 years or so. If there's a lot of development pressure, I tell some clients maybe every 5 years. Maybe you can go longer than 10 years, but that's what I would recommend. And based on my experience with Fort Atkinson over the last 25 years, that's the appropriate time. That's my presentation. Hopefully I haven't missed anything. Andy, anything I need to mention? Tim, anything I need to mention? I'd be happy to take any questions, comments, concerns. All these high school kids are budding water engineers. That's why they came here.
I'm just curious within the recommendations, so both within the short term and long term, do you give those in kind of a prioritization ranking of, if the department or if the city can't address all of those things, kind of here's our suggestion of where you should start or what the most pressing issues within there
The
are?
main pump station is number one. That needs to get done just because of a 50-year-old structure that is used a lot. And it's right down in the middle of town here. And it's very critical part of the infrastructure of the overall water utility. The north pressure zone is kind of going to be dictated on when that development happens. And as far as the infrastructure replacement program, that's a plan that Andy and Tim and you folks will have to put together because that's a big price tag. But the biggest improvement short term would be the main station for sure. After that, long-term improvements, starting to get crystal ball a little bit. And again, any water towers that might be required north and south, again, depending on development. In the short term, you can handle that with Worcester Station, and that won't be $1 million, it'll be something less than that. And that's your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Just to characterize that a bit, the Banker Road property that we're looking at developing, probably 2/3 of that to half is not in this pressure zone. But as we go to the west side or the east side of Banker Road up into the higher elevations, that's when we run out of water pressure and have to put in some supplemental pressure to get that residential pressure. So you're not getting a drip at the shower. Basically, you have a full set of 35 PSI at your house. So we have a lot of opportunity in that development area, I think, with our existing system. But as that takes off, that's when we'll have to look at investing in that pressure area. And then the infrastructure replacement program that Pat was mentioning, that is the main replacement program. So that's what we have been approved from the PSC to replace 1% of our 70 miles-ish of water main that we have in the city each year. So that's about $875,000 or $850,000, somewhere in that range. And we're starting that Actually, we're doing quite a bit more than $800,000 in 2022 with the map that Rebecca had showed, leveraging those CDBG funds for that. So getting a pretty good start on that replacement program right away.
Other questions? Other questions, second call? I'd like to thank everybody in Fort Atkinson. I've worked here probably the most for a duration from start to finish, mid-90s through today. I'm kind of at the tail end of my career, but I've enjoyed working with Fort Atkinson over those years. This projects and other projects as well. It's been great working with Andy and now Tim. And I wish you all the best of luck in the future. And thanks for hiring me for 25 years.
Thank you
Pat.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're having the mass exodus of high school students, so we'll wait for a second. All right, would be looking for a motion to accept and file.
And move to accept and file the water system master plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Again, any last questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 7, resolutions and ordinances. 7A, the second and possible final reading of an ordinance to repeal and recreate section 1-14 of the City of Fort Atkinson Municipal Code relating to establishment of voting wards and boundaries.
Okay, on October 19th, the council approved a resolution establishing voting wards in the city of Fort Atkinson based on the 2020 US Census data as part of the Jefferson County redistricting process. The resolution has been submitted to the county and is sufficient to move forward with that countywide process. The city's voting wards are described in section 1.14 of the Municipal Code of Ordinances, and the new ward boundaries and descriptions based on that 2020 census data and approved through the resolution on the 19th must replace the former boundary descriptions so that the ordinance accurately describes our voting wards. The ordinance in your packet repeals and recreates section 1.14 of the municipal code, replacing the former language with the accurate and updated descriptions of the city's new voting ward boundaries. Staff recommends that the council perform the second reading of this ordinance, and staff further recommends that the city council suspend the rules, waiving a third reading of this ordinance, and enact the ordinance to repeal and recreate section 1.14 of the City of Fort Atkinson Municipal Code relating to voting wards and boundaries.
Is the recommendation to waive the third reading based on any specific urgency or just general sense that we're probably not going to get any more feedback on this?
I don't believe we'll get feedback. The resolution is already passed and in the county's possession. So at this point, we can't make any changes to this.
Understood.
So this is just to save some administrative time and bringing it back a third time.
Very good.
I would move to suspend the rules and waive a third reading of this ordinance to repeal and recreate section 1-14 of the City of Fort Atkinson Municipal Code relating to the establishment of voting ward and boundaries.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Becker,
Aye.
Councilman Hartwick.
Aye.
Councilman Housley,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
President Shear.
Aye. That motion carries.
I would also move to adopt this ordinance to repeal and recreate section 1-14 of the City of Fort Atkinson Municipal Code relating to the establishment of voting wards and boundaries.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This will also be a roll call vote.
Councilman Becker,
Aye.
Councilman Hartwick,
Aye.
Councilman Housley,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
President Shear.
Aye. That motion carries. Takes us to agenda item 8, reports of officers, boards, and committees. 8A, the city manager's report.
Thank you. So I would like to take a moment to recognize our volunteer Captain Paul Verhalen of the city's fire department for receiving the First Responder of the Year award for his life-saving efforts at the August 10th fire here in Fort Atkinson. He was nominated for this award by Chief Roush and was recognized by the Wisconsin State Assembly last week. We will ask him to come to a city council meeting in the near future for additional recognition But I did want to mention how thankful we are to have him on our team as a volunteer with our fire department. The budgeting process continues to move forward. You all took a look at the product of a lot of work over the last few months. So I'm open to any feedback from the council or the public on this document as I prepare it for approval on the 16th of November. As mentioned in the budget document, the city did receive a Fort Atkinson Community Foundation grant for over $273,000 to support the city's effort towards the 2022 public safety referendum. And pending council approval later on tonight's agenda, I hopefully will be very excited to submit an application for a neighborhood investment fund grant from the Department of Administration for $4.9 million to support the base project, along with public improvements that would not otherwise be possible without this grant. So the program is on an accelerated timeline. So if the council supports this application, we should know by the end of the year if we receive this grant or not. That is all I have to report.
All right, thank you. Takes us to agenda item 9A, the review and possible action relating to an accepted offer to purchase the Walsh properties adjacent to the wastewater treatment facility with wastewater utility unrestricted reserve funds.
Okay, the city council has been negotiating the purchase of 3 parcels of land adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant known as the Walsh properties over the last couple of years. In 2017 and 2018, the city made offered to purchase the properties, but the sellers in the city could not come to an agreement on the price. This matter came up for discussion again in September of this year, and the city and the sellers have negotiated a purchase price over the last several months. And that purchase price is $280,000 for just over 65 acres of land along the wastewater treatment facility. The city is currently investing about $15 million at the wastewater treatment plant at its current location. While we do not anticipate needing additional land within the next 30 years for expansion, it is possible that such land would be needed in the future. Additionally, relocating this treatment plant may cost upwards of $200 million if necessary in the future. The utility desires to purchase the property so that it is in control of the area surrounding the treatment facility. The land could be used in the future for facility expansion, alternate treatment concepts, and opportunities for alternate energy production, such as a solar array. There are reserve funds available in the wastewater utility fund to pay for the purchase of the Walsh properties. The reserve account serves as the equivalent of the general fund's fund balance account. Any unbudgeted funds that remain unassigned and unexpended at the end of the year, and any unforeseen revenues end up in this reserve account. And at this time, there's about $2 million in the account that is unrestricted due to the general health, financial health, of the wastewater utility. No general fund tax dollars would be used to purchase the land, and there would not be any impact on the city's tax rate nor on any wastewater utility rates if the council votes to approve this land purchase. Staff does recommend that the city council approve the accepted offer to purchase the Walsh properties for $280,000 using the wastewater utility unassigned reserve funds. Paul Christensen is here tonight. He or I could answer any questions the council may have.
Have we received any input from the public?
We have not.
I think we've extensively gone over the pros and cons of this acquisition in our closed session meetings, so I don't have any questions.
Yeah, no, I think this is a reasonable step. This is something the city's examined for several years now, and I think I look at it as basically just a insurance policy for the wastewater treatment plant in case we ever need any future expansions. So I'm going to go ahead and make the motion to approve the accepted offer to purchase the Walsh properties for $280,000 using wastewater utility unassigned reserve funds.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Becker,
Aye.
Councilman Hartwick,
Aye.
Councilman Housley.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
President Shear.
Aye. That motion carries. Agenda item 10, new business. 10A, the review and possible action to authorize the city manager to execute the 2022 joint powers agreement with Jefferson County for the county 911 emergency system.
Okay, annually Jefferson County seeks action from the county's municipalities to enter into a joint powers agreement for the county 911 emergency system. The agreement states that if an emergency services vehicle is dispatched in response to a 911 call for service through the county's dispatch system, that vehicle and its personnel will render aid to the persons needing such aid or services regardless of whether the vehicle is operating inside or outside of that vehicle's normal jurisdiction. The agreement is required per state statutes when the county has implemented a 911 system, as Jefferson County has done, and is necessary to provide emergency services to those in need, regardless of jurisdictional boundaries. This is an annual agreement, and it has not changed. I did review this with both the fire chief and the police chief, who had no questions, comments, or issues. So as such, staff recommends that the city council authorize the city manager to execute the joint powers agreement for 2022.
Rebecca, I'm just curious, is this something that all surrounding communities of ours are in as well? So that if this is something our departments are potentially helping in other communities, I assume there's a
Yes,
give and take there that other communities are as well.
yes, they enter into these agreements with the other municipalities in the county.
Anybody else has other questions then? I move to authorize the city manager to execute the 2022 joint powers agreement with Jefferson County for the county 911 emergency system.
Second.
A motion and a couple of seconds. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 10B, the review and possible action relating to the purchase of a street sweeper through the Stormwater Utility Fund.
I'll sit in that comfortable chair for so long. Stand up. Okay, so this is a item before you guys. You have a memo that describes what I'm requesting, but essentially the background is the department, before I took over in 2010, purchased a Elgin Crosswind street sweeper to replace an old outdated mechanical sweeper, which we incidentally still have and do still use on occasion when necessary. We utilized at that time a grant from the Natural Resources Stormwater Grant Funds to help us purchase that and increase our efficiency in sweeping to better meet our stormwater requirements with the DNR. We do heavily use that equipment. So the Wisconsin Department of Transportation publishes data on heavy equipment usage or heavy equipment and light duty equipment lifespans. And this particular piece of equipment, because it is so heavily used, is typically about 10 years. The unit that we did purchase at that time is a bit of an amalgamation of two different vehicles. In 2008, they produced the chassis for that. It was a leftover chassis that we acquired for a discounted price, and they built the sweeper in 2010 onto that unit. So essentially, it's a 2008 vehicle with a 2010 sweeper on it, which presents itself in unique ways right now, and it's very hard to get parts for. They don't make that particular chassis anymore, so we struggle to replace pieces and parts on that particular unit. The proposed new street sweeper is designed to allow access to all the belts, hoses, and perishable items with much less frequency, and also easier for our service department to maintain. So with that redesign, it's going to help us to save a little money on expensive repairs. The department went ahead and reached out to two equipment providers, which are relatively local, Menominee Falls and West Dallas. These two companies were nice enough to come in and bring in several units for us to take a look at. We went ahead and asked them to go ahead and spec out two units of similar units for us to utilize and to review. There are other dealers in the state of Wisconsin. However, the manufacturers are very far away from us. One, actually, there's a dealer in Wisconsin that sells units that are built in the UK. So, which makes it very difficult for us to have any kind of warranty work done at all. I don't want to have to ship something to the UK to have it fixed. So let's see. So from a financial point of view, we took a look at both of the bids. McQueen Equipment provided us the lowest investment proposal of $262,049. McQueen is also a company that we've worked for and worked with in the past. So we purchased our last sweeper from them. We've got a really good warranty reputation with them and a good service reputation with them. So they were nice enough to also guarantee us a trade-in value of $27,700 for our current unit, and offer us the option to sell that unit on the state website. So we can put that unit up to auction. If we get more money for it, fantastic. However, if no bid comes in above $27,700, they will take the unit for us and guarantee us that money. So that would leave us with a net guaranteed expense of about $234,349. R now came out, and that's the dealer that came out with a different piece of equipment from Schwartz, and their bid came in several $1,000s higher. And also they do not sell the Elgin machines, so we're not interested in taking a trade on that unit at all. So I guess staff is recommending that the council approve the purchase of an Elgin Regen X sweeper for the investment of $262,049 from McQueen Equipment, with a guaranteed trade value of $27,700 for our 2008-2010 Crosswind. And also with the option of us to try to sell that particular unit. These funds would come from our stormwater utility, because that unit actually helps us with our to meet our stormwater requirements with the DNR. So do you have any questions?
I just see that the price is valid until Sunday,
Yeah, so that I threw that in there because both of the dealers are experiencing drastic increases in steel costs right now. So those two manufacturing companies have already informed us that it's 8 to 12% increase after this timeline. So if we don't do something now, we can at least see a minimum 8% increase.
So we're still good though.
Yes, correct. Yeah, they've granted me the ability to come before you today and ask you to okay the purchase. So
I move to approve the purchase of the Elgin Regen X sweeper for the investment of $262,049 from McQueen Equipment, with a guaranteed trade-in value of $27,700 for the city's 2010 Elgin Crosswind sweeper, and the option to attempt to sell the city's currently owned sweeper prior to delivery of the new unit.
Second.
I'd just like to add to that because no other major equipment or projects have been done in the stormwater utility fund in 2021, this can be paid for through operating funds.
We have a motion and a second. Any other questions? This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Becker,
Aye.
Councilman Hartwick,
Aye.
Councilman Housing,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
President Shear.
Aye. Motion carries.
thank you all.
Thank you. That takes us to 10C, the review and possible action to authorize the city manager to apply for a neighborhood investment grant on behalf of the Badgerland After School Enrichment Program.
So as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I'm really excited about the opportunity to assist the base program with this grant. So the Department of Administration has developed this neighborhood investment fund grant program with ARPA funds, with their ARPA funds, not ours. So these are state funds. They intend to award $200 million in grants through this program, with the minimum grant award being $1 million and the maximum being $15 million. The deadline for applications was initially November 4th, but has been extended to November 11th. They are, as I mentioned before, they're on an accelerated path here. So the grant awards are expected in December. And if awarded, the grant agreement execution between the city and the Department of Administration would likely also take place in December. The project is required to be, any project eligible for these grant funds is required to be shovel ready, and all work and any associated expenditures must be complete by December 31st, 2024, which is the same as the standards for the city's ARPA funds. So as we know, BASE is currently fundraising for a new facility to be located at 509 Clarence Street and 520 Edward Street in the city here. BASE seeks to purchase the property and renovate the existing structure known as the Horde Building into a single facility to house all of their after-school programming and some additional licensed daycare programming for children ages 4 to 6. BASE has received a Fort Atkinson Community Foundation grant of $2.75 million and intended to fundraise for the additional costs associated with the project. So staff is proposing to apply for this program grant on behalf of BASE to support their fundraising efforts and to provide public improvements to the infrastructure in the area. If the grant application is approved, the city and BASE will need to enter into some sort of a legal document outlining the terms and responsibilities of both parties relating to grant administration, disbursement of funds, documentation, et cetera. BASE is currently working with MSI General on the site and building development, and they would continue to do so. As mentioned before, the grant would be between the city and the grant agreement, would be between the city and the Department of Administration. So the city is seeking $4.9 million to serve as matching funds for the Community Foundation's grant. There is a budget proposed to, or a budget attached to the materials in your packet that outlines the proposed costs. So staff recommends that the city council authorize the city manager to apply for a neighborhood investment fund grant in the amount of $4.9 million on behalf of BASE for their redevelopment project located at 509 Clarence Street and 520 Edward Street. If the program grant is awarded for the city, to the city for this project, staff will bring this matter back to the council for final approval and acceptance of the award. Be happy to answer any questions. And I see we do have a couple of representatives from BASE on the call as well. And I'm sure they would be happy to answer any questions you might have as well.
I'm just very excited about this opportunity and think it's an amazing thing that the city is getting involved to try to bring something that would not only be a tremendous resource for BASE and the kids they serve, but I think has the potential to be an incredible resource just for our community at large. This could be a really exciting thing for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And I think it's awesome that this opportunity is even available. Rebecca, I am curious. I know you said the minimum awards are 1 million. You're applying for 4.9. Is that an all or nothing? Like you'll either get the 4.9, or could they come back and say, we're giving you $1 million or 2 million?
It is not all or nothing.
Okay.
So they could fund us at a different level than we requested, based on our budget proposal or based on how many projects they get. I feel really good about our chances here, especially because of the time constraints in the application. The application, the announcement was made at the end of August, but the materials and eligibility was not really defined until probably about a week or two ago. So, and these projects do need to be shovel ready and all the money needs to be spent by the end of December in 24. So I'm not sure there's just a massive amount of projects that would fit that criteria. So I am really hopeful.
And Andy, maybe this is a question for you. My only other thing I was just curious about is I know there were some ongoing environmental studies in that space. Would any of that put the shovel readiness of the project at risk potentially, or is that not a concern?
That was, I don't think so.
Okay.
It still is being completely evaluated, but the early indications are that the presence of the contaminants there can be easily mitigated, and that it wouldn't be a showstopper, so to speak.
I agree with Councilmember Hartwick. This is really exciting. And I think what I like is, and what I think will make this a strong application is you're not just hitting on the facility itself, but you're hitting on the surrounding infrastructure. And I imagine that's something that the people at Wisconsin DOA like to see on applications like this too. So I'm excited. I'm very hopeful about this. And it just goes to show when we have good people paying attention to things and taking advantage of opportunities that hopefully really good things can happen in our city. So looking forward to this.
I then would move to authorize the city manager to apply for the neighborhood investment grant on behalf of the Badgerland After School Enrichment Program.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments or discussion?
Yeah, I'm just curious, when the environmental studies are done, will the information provided be provided to council?
I would think so, sure.
I also just want to say, we've talked at great extent about the impact that base will have in that area of our community. And we are very fortunate to be able to step up and help our community and help this project. But I also want to really thank City Manager Lemire for keeping an eye on this and bringing it forward to us to be able to authorize this. So we do have a motion and a second. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. That takes us to 10D, the review and possible action relating to a certified survey map for the Dempsey property located at 720 McMillan Street.
Yeah, I should have planned ahead and put the map up on our new TVs, but unfortunately I didn't. The CSM was reviewed by the Planning Commission. They had no concerns. This is a parcel located directly across from Ralph Park. The current owner is kind of tidying up what was a larger parcel with a home on it. They're removing the home from the parcel and leaving the remnant as part of a sale of the adjacent properties. As I said, Planning Commission had no concerns about it. I think we may have some folks in the audience associated with this as well. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, I think it's probably better you didn't put the map on because it was challenging during Planning Commission to figure out which lot one you guys were talking about, but no, this is very straightforward. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the certified survey map for the Dempsey property at 720 McMillan Street.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other questions or conversation? All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking out to the end of the meeting. Agenda item 11, miscellaneous. This evening we have none. Agenda item 12, claims, appropriations, and contract payments. 12A, the review and possible action relating to the verified claims presented by the Director of Finance and authorization of payment.
I move to approve the list of verified claims and authorize payment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This will be a roll call vote.
Councilman Becker,
Aye.
Councilman Hartwick,
Aye.
Councilman Housley,
Aye.
Councilman Johnson,
Aye.
President Shear.
Aye, motion carries. That takes us to agenda item 13, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.